Some simply hit their prime in the wrong era. Others lacked one crucial ingredient to their game. All are deserving of the highest levels of respect. These are the greatest fighters to never get their hands on UFC gold. Jorge Masvidal. The late career resurgence of Jorge "Gamebred" Masvidal caught virtually everyone completely off guard. Not that the pre-resurrection Masvidal wasn't talented, but after a stint on a reality TV show led to some serious soul-searching, a newly bulked up and driven version of Gamebred made his return to the octagon, delivering back-to-back knockouts of Darren Till and Ben Askren to earn himself a legion of new fans. But make no mistake, Jorge's entire career has been quite remarkable. Always cited by analysts as one of the most underrated gems in the sport, Masvidal's expert boxing, ever-improving wrestling, and highly polished jiu-jitsu made him a fan favorite long before he became the force of nature we know today. And though, sure, his attempts to capture Kamaru Usman's welterweight belt both fell flat, there's no doubt that Jorge Masvidal is one of the best 170-pound fighters of this era. Stephen Thompson. Though he doesn't quite find as many finishes nowadays, Stephen Thompson remains one of the greatest strikers to have ever laced up gloves in the UFC, and his highlight reel is truly something special. From doubling up on his spinning attacks against Jake Ellenberger to hammering Johnny Hendricks to earn a crack at the belt, watching Wonder Boy, even when he's losing, is always a very unique experience. With a fighting style that's rooted in karate, Thompson's darting movement makes him something more akin to a cobra than a mere martial artist. Even as he ages, his speed and dexterity haven't fully left him, and his ability to fire off kicks with minimal telegraphing is as effective as ever. Time is certainly working against him as he attempts to make one more run at the title, but even if he never finds his way to UFC gold, Wonderboy Thompson has done more than enough to ensure that his name will be remembered long after he retires. Joseph Benavides. Sometimes, a fighter's potential for greatness can be impeded simply because of unfortunate timing. And when it came to Joseph Benavides, being a flyweight during the reign of Demetrius Johnson unfortunately left him playing second fiddle to Mighty Mouse for the majority of his career. But make no mistake, Joe B was an extremely talented fighter in his prime. And during those years, his only losses came to UFC champions Dominic Cruz and the aforementioned Johnson, as well as the future Bellator champ Sergio Pettis. Apart from that, Benavides beat everyone else who stood in front of him. Of course, he'll likely always be remembered for being number 2 to the longtime champ Mighty Mouse, but in reality, when number 1 is that much of a generational talent, coming in as the runner-up isn't all that bad. Demian Maia. Demian Maia is part of a rare group of fighters who managed to carve out runs at the title across 2 different weight classes. And this Brazilian jiu-jitsu master didn't get an easy road to his clashes with Anderson Silva and later Tyron Woodley. Blessed with a BJJ base that was completely in a league of its own, fans of the sport watched as Maia slowly adapted his game for the many demands that come with fighting inside the octagon. And though his pair of championship matchups saw him largely nullified by both Silva and Woodley, during his prime, Maia was one of the most awkward stylistic opponents the sport had to offer. Sure, his striking never truly grew past being serviceable at best, but whenever he was able to get the fight to the mat, watching this phenom go to work was truly something to behold. After a 2-fight losing skid, he was recently cut from the UFC, but after 14 career submissions and victories over the likes of Ben Askren, Jorge Masvidal, and Carlos Condit on his resume, Demian Maia certainly has a career worth being proud of. Alexander Gustafsson. Alexander Gustafsson will likely forever be known as one of the biggest what-ifs in MMA history. A hugely talented and skilled fighter who unfortunately came up on the losing end of one of the greatest title fights in the history of the sport. Many people believe that the Mauler did enough to hand the legendary John Jones his first legitimate professional defeat, before he then went right down to the wire with Daniel Cormier in another 205-pound title matchup that went against him. You really can't get much closer than that to achieving UFC gold. But for Gus, these 2 major setbacks led to stuttering form within the division's top 10, before a short-lived move to heavyweight eventually saw him written off as a future contender. Now once again fighting at 205 pounds, at 34, it's not like Gustafsson is ancient by any metric, but after 3 unsuccessful attempts at becoming champ, it's hard to know what the future holds for this Swedish standout. Nick Diaz. The story of Nick Diaz's fighting career can't really be boiled down to his second stint in the UFC. Sure, he looked amazing in there against BJ Penn, but his showdowns with Carlos Condit, Anderson Silva, and George St. Pierre saw Nick largely nullified, as his opponents did everything in their power to avoid a head-on collision with this extremely effective volume puncher. If you're looking for a glimpse of prime Nick Diaz, you'll have to take a dive into his reign as the champion of the Strikeforce welterweight division. But even in his earliest days during his first run in the UFC, Nick still managed to serve up some pretty iconic highlights. And if you haven't seen his first matchup against the future champion Robbie Lawler from 2004, do yourself a favor and should check it out immediately. One of the best welterweights of his era, and a fighter whose record is often misinterpreted. Wanderlei Silva. The Axe Murderer might not be the most flattering nickname imaginable, but one look at prime Wanderlei Silva will tell you all you need to know about this truly ferocious competitor. Indeed, his finest work took place in Pride prior to his signing with the UFC, but Silva was still able to serve up some memorable moments inside the octagon, even if he left the promotion with a losing record. A committed brawler with an uncoachable desire to win. When Silva's second run in the UFC came in 2007 and he was matched up with Chuck Liddell for his debut, fans were excited, but also realistic with their expectations, given that both men had seen better days. The resulting fight was an instant classic and fight of the year for 2007. Liddell would get the judges' nod in the end, but Wanderlei had once again proven why he is among the most revered fighters of MMA's golden era just after the turn of the century. Dan Henderson. Another fighter who had their best days under the Pride banner, Dan Henderson's first UFC outing in 1998 was followed by a legendary run through many different promotions, with Hendo competing everywhere from middleweight up as far as heavyweight. Blessed with one of the single most deadly weapons in the sport, his H-bomb overhand right, Henderson brought immense power, phenomenal Greco-Roman wrestling, and a granite chin with him to the cage each and every time he competed during his best years. Standout victories over Fedor Emelianenko, Shogun Rua, Wanderlei Silva, and one particularly brutal KO of Michael Bisping are just some of the memorable wins Henderson had under his belt by the time he retired. And obviously, the title shot he was given for his final UFC fight, a rematch with Bisping, was completely undeserved. But let's not forget that he gave the champ some real issues in that fight, even as a 46-year-old, a fan favorite who will forever have his own special place in the history books. Yoel Romero. Coming in next is the Soldier of God Yoel Romero, one of the strangest fighters to have ever made the walk to the UFC octagon. Blessed with the type of genetics that most men would kill for, Romero's time in the middleweight top 5 saw him on the receiving end of several decisions that could have easily gone the other way. Seriously, Yoel's fighting style was so odd that it seemed to sway judges from giving him rounds that he likely won. His 9-4 UFC record doesn't tell the tale of just how deadly this guy was, especially once he adapted his game to account for his shortcomings in the stamina department. Even in his 40s, Romero looked like he was knocking on the door of his physical prime, which, when you factor in his years of wrestling training in Cuba, makes his longevity within combat sports all the more impressive. A 1 in a billion athlete in every sense of the phrase. Alistair Overeem. Is it controversial to place Alistair Overeem in the top spot here? Sure, he's had his chin checked on more than one occasion, somehow managing to extend his career in the top flight far longer than many would have deemed realistic. But when you're speaking about the professional run of this Dutch kickboxer, the fact that he competed for 21 years and was still routinely beating and finishing guys much younger than him while he himself was on the far side of 40? Yeah, Overeem is truly one of the oddities of the mixed martial arts world. Though he has been knocked out 18 times in both MMA and kickboxing, somehow the Reem always found a way to rebound, even when reaching a title matchup with Stipe Miocic after 3 KO defeats in 4 fights. And though Stipe was able to find his chin, let's not forget that Overeem also tagged and dropped the champ during that wild first round. He wasn't the perfect fighter by any means, but boy, did Alistair Overeem make his presence felt in that heavyweight division, a legend of the sport, and one whose career will likely age just as he did, like the finest of wine.